What's the worst thing you unknowingly did as a child? I had a lot of medical issues as a child. And so we had a massive drawer full of my prescription meds. When I was 9 years old, a friend from school came over to my house. We played for a while before she told me that she had a stomachache. I, knowing just how to help, gave her some of my medicine for a similar issue. She got pretty sick. And I got a really long lecture about how we do not give our medications to other people. I still feel bad about that one. My mom has had severe depression. And I wrote her a poem for Mother's Day when I was 8 that had lines like "I love you even though you cry all the time." I was really proud because I thought it really showed how much I care, and I read it aloud to her. I didn't get the reaction I was expecting. Yeesh. I used to go around and proudly tell people that you weren't allowed to have parents when you pass a certain age. I think it was 25. I think I was 5 at the time. The weirdest part is my parents were in their 40s and my grandparents, except my mom's dad, were still alive. I feel terrible remembering it as an adult. I could lose my dad any week now and it terrifies me. Probably not the worst, but the one I can think of off the top of my head. I live within a half hour of the US-Canada border. Canadian side. And back in the 80s and 90s and earlier, a lot of people would go over to the States to buy gas, beer, milk, etc. It was pretty much a Sunday tradition for us. One time when I was maybe 6 or 7, we were over there for the usual load of junk food etc. And my parents bought me a cap gun. Coming back across the border, the agents ask the usual questions about where we were, what we're bringing back. Dad lists off everything, except probably a lot of beer and tobacco. Because smuggling that stuff was super easy back then. And when he finished, I pipe up in the backseat and say, "And a gun, comma, somewhat proud of my new toy." Well, turns out that's a surefire way to get your car searched. And your dad busted for smuggling beer. Who'd have known? Edit. Holy, this blew up more than I expected. I should mention that getting busted for smuggling didn't mean they hauled him off to jail. He just either lost the beer or had to pay a bunch of duty fees on it. Not as bad as it sounded, I guess. And beer isn't illegal up here. It was just way cheaper to go get it down there. As a young little shithead, my favorite prank was to lock bathroom stall doors and then crawl underneath them and exit the scene. One time, my parents dragged me to Costco with them. I went to the biggest stall in the back of the bathroom, locked that shitty and scampered away with a grin. I ended up going back to the same Costco the next day because my parents had to return something. I went to the same stall and it was still locked. This time I actually had to take a shit. I crawled under the door only come face to face with an old guy looking at me like I was from another planet. I recoiled away so hard that I smacked my head on the bottom of the door and ran from that bathroom like I'd never run in my life. I crack myself up whenever I try to imagine what that guy was thinking when a 9-year-old tried to hijack his toilet. I don't know if it's the worst, but I ruined my parents' romantic anniversary. I was around 7 and I woke up in the middle of the night because my stomach didn't feel well. So I went upstairs to tell my parents. When I opened their door, I remember there were candles, music playing, and when my mom saw me, she immediately pulled a blanket around herself. She asked me what I was doing up, and before I could even finish my sentence, I projectile vomited all over everything. At least you had a reason. I loved Ninja Turtles when I was 7 and went through a phase where I kicked in doors to enter rooms. Luckily I have a shitty memory or I might be scarred. I used to spend several weeks out of every summer staying with my aunt and uncle. I got to play with my cousin. And presumably my single father got to take a break. One year, on the day I was due to come home, I called and asked permission to stay another week. And he agreed. After I went home, a family friend told me they had been at my house the week before for my surprise welcome home party. Dad bought a cake, decorated, and BBQ'd. This was a man who did not entertain or demonstrate affection. True to character. He never told me about the party he attempted. Edit. Thanks for the heart to heart. Reddit. To clarify, this was the 80s. before cell phones. So rescheduling the day would have been difficult. Plus just inconvenience to everyone who had agreed to attend. He could have made me come home. But the point is that he didn't. Because he didn't want to disappoint me. I was still in HS when he died. So not mature enough to recognize how hard he tried sometimes. Glad to hear so many of you will be calling your dads. When I was about 8 I asked my dad if we could play the naked man game. My dad, trying not to panic, asked me what it was. I responded it's the one we play when the babysitter is over. He then asked me to show him where the naked man game was. So I took him to the closet, opened the door, and pointed up to operation. He told me years later that he nearly had a heart attack. The first day I moved into my new house at 6 years old I was meeting the new neighbor boy who was a couple years older than me. We were out in his driveway talking about some stuff when his mom walked out and, for whatever reason, I instinctively smacked her ass as she walked by. My parents still bring up how embarrassing that was for her to come over and tell them what happened. You reminded me how in daycare when I was around 4, a lady that worked there walked by and I said in a really stupid flirting voice, "Hey baby." My parents still make fun of me for that. Backstory. I got a really bad burn on my arm while my dad was taking tea out of the microwave. I thought it would be really funny to slam the door on him while he was grabbing it. The result was a huge and bad burn on my arm. Cut to a while later. My arm was almost healed, but you could still see the burn in spots. I hit my head on a table and cut it open. My mom brings me to the hospital to get stitches. Right when they are done stitching my head, I say have this conversation with the doctor. Me. Oh. My other owie is almost gone. Doctor. What other owie? Me. From when my daddy poured hot tea on me. That resulted in a very awkward conversation between my mother and the doctor. And the doctor almost calling CPS. Was about 3-4 years old walking with my family at a massively busy mall. Saw a little person and yelled out loud to my mom. Thinking it was harmless. Look mommy. A midget. Needless to say my family was more than a little embarrassed. At least at 4 years old it's understandable. One time my mom exclaimed, "Look Chippa Chippa. A hobbit," when she saw a little person on the street. This might be my moment. Or maybe I'm too late but oh well. I love this story. When I was like 5 or 6, I went to a children's world daycare center. I had a giant jar of pennies that I and my family had saved. And I took it to daycare with me. There was a gumball machine. And it cost 1 penny to get a gumball. This meant I had power. People wanted my pennies. And I quickly learned that I could get thing I wanted in exchange for the pennies. It turns out what I wanted was to see what the girls in the daycare had under their pants. I'd give a penny. We'd go under the jungle gym. And they'd pull their pants down and expose themselves. I'd usually pull my pants down for comparison. This must have gone on for a couple weeks. But I was eventually caught and sent to a child counselor. TLDR. I, as a little boy, turned little girls into penny whores. Please don't put me on a list. I was a small child at the time. Edit. I told myself I was better than this. But I'm not. I can't believe my top comment by far is my Penny WH Ray story. Also thanks for the gold. It's my first. I'd prefer a penny though. When we were both 8, I gave my cousin a corncob pipe I found in a drawer in the garage. And he put lawn clippings in it and smoked it. And had to be rushed to the hospital. Apparently my aunt and uncle had just chemically treated the lawn and he smoked a whole bunch of nasty pesticides and herbicides. When I was little I overheard my mom saying how my aunt chewed with her mouth open. Sometime later my aunt is in the car with my mom, myself and my sister. And I proudly yell out how my mom says she chews with her mouth open. It was terribly awkward and I'm glad I can only remember fragments of it. Another time I came home from school crying and in front of my mother and grandmother told my mom how at school everyone else has a great grandmother but I have a mean one. Didn't understand the concept and we laugh about it constantly now. I messed up 2 computer monitors back in after school daycare in kindergarten. There were these magnet toys that were laying around and for some reason I had put it up to the monitor and thought it was so cool how they made rainbow colors on the monitor. Me and a friend continued to do it until we both got yelled at, and that's all I can remember. I don't remember what happened after that, but I'm pretty sure they stopped putting out the magnets. Edit. Damn, I didn't expect so many people to have a similar experience to this. It's good to know that there was a degauss feature now because I thought I permanently ruined those things until now, mayo. I had a habit of storing entire phone conversations between my mother and her mother in my head. I was little and she'd just talk in front of me and assume I wasn't listening. Now to be fair, I was very little. Okay. Well, I heard her laughing about how she had a crush on her co-worker and grabbed their ass. I guess it was an ongoing joke. Looking back at it. Close bracket. My dad would play with our basset hound by kind of grabbing his thigh, and he'd reach around to grab my dad's hand. And then my dad would grab the other side. etc etc. So I was watching him do this and laughing, and then that's like what mom did to Jason. Double quote. Oh. Shit. My ears are still ringing. Eek. Now both my parents were assholes to each other. Rampant infidelity. The works. And they're both assholes to everyone now that they're divorced, so I don't feel as bad. But still. I was about 7 when I made an enemy of my next door neighbor. I still don't see it as my fault that he had side chicks and side children, and I didn't understand shit about that. When one of his assorted children came to play, I was like, I was playing with your brother the other week. What brother? Apostrophe. Oh, you know. The one your dad has with that other lady. Book smart street dumb. Was me. I called out my 2 cousins, who were brother and sister, for being girlfriend and boyfriend because I saw them kissing and touching each other. Caused us to miss a few family holidays as things blew over. Edit. Yes, I saw them kissing. Also, the male cousin admitted they had touched each other. We were in the 10-12 year range at that point. No, we're not from Alabama. Roll Tide. Yes, now they are in their 30s and married and normal, not married to each other. I was at a birthday party. Age 7. And there was this orange air freshener that smelled so good. So I sprayed it all over myself. And then I smelled really good. So all the kids started spraying it on themselves. Not 20 minutes later. All of us are crying and screaming because our skin is burning and turning red. There was something very irritating in the air freshener. I can attest that it burns. My family and I were going to my cousin's wedding and my brother and I were fighting. He grabbed my grandma's can of orange air freshener and sprayed me. It burned so much we ended up missing the wedding and going home. When my cousin and I were 5-6, we got hooked on this amazing hot chocolate at this hotel. The hotel had a bar in the middle of the pool, so you can drink it while you're sitting in the water, which made it even cooler. Our parents told us we couldn't have more, so we went to a random couple and asked them to buy us the hot chocolate. They did, and they babysat us until our parents found us. A few hours later, we didn't say anything about the hot chocolate since we didn't want to get in trouble. So the couple never got paid back. Looking back, I think they were probably some honeymooning couple and we forced them to babysit our 2 bratty kids. TLDR. Probably convinced a couple never to have kids. I chopped my sister's finger off in the bedroom door. My mum told me you always shut it so my sister couldn't get in the room. So I did. Unfortunately, her finger was in the way and it chopped the top of her pinky finger off all the way to the first knuckle bit. It was pretty gory. Edit, no, they didn't reattach it. It got mangled pretty bad. I just texted my sister and told her about her pinky finger's Reddit fame. She was mildly impressed. Accidentally pitchforked my neighbor in the head when I was about 7. I was helping her, in her 70s, do some gardening, planting flower beds etc. And we were just finishing up. I, in all my 7-year-old bravado, heft the pitchfork over my back to go and put it away, and accidentally catch her in the back of the head with it. She ended up going to the hospital needing stitches. But she forgave me. Edit. Insert obligatory edit about my best comment being about almost killing my neighbor. To clarify, yes. Obviously I was sorry for doing it. When my mum came over wondering what had happened, she freaked out. But the neighbor said that it was an accident. So no big punishment or anything. Neighbor's all fine now. And doesn't hold a grudge. Once when I was about 4, I sprayed a man driving by my house on his motorcycle with a water hose. I have no idea why I did it. I just remember that I was playing with the hose and he kept riding by over and over and I just had an impulse and went with it. He didn't come by again after that. Obviously. One time I put a penny in my parents' car's cigarette lighter socket. It was the 80s so lighter sockets were all over the car, including the doors and the back seat. It completely drained the battery within a few hours. And it took the guy at the garage a few days to figure out what was wrong with the electrical system. I did this. It blew a fuse. It was okay since I was a child. My friend did this with a paper clip in my car when we were teenagers. Not as okay when you're 17. I was with my mom over at her friend's house. We were out in the barn looking at their chickens. As we were going out, the neighbor guy shut the automatic garage door. And I thought it would be neat to do a sweet James Bond move and slide under the door as it was closing. Long story short, I got stuck under the door. And the guy had to lift it with his hands against the motor so I could slide out. I was a little older than I'd like to admit. I unknowingly broke my arm when I was 4. My parents had no idea. I didn't complain much even though it hurt like hell. I wound up carrying my arm around with the other arm. Parents noticed me doing this but didn't know what to think. The break eventually healed this way and when I went for a checkup the doctor informed my parents that I had broken my arm. The worst one was taking my mother's personal massager to school for show and tell as I was a fairly little child and that's what it said on the packaging. It wasn't obviously a marital aid as it was one of the more bullet options. However my at the time female teacher knew exactly what that was and took it away from me and called my mother to let her know as delicately as possible what I had taken to school. It wasn't until I was much older that I realized what I had done. My mother gets a good laugh out of that one though for sure. Edit and now my most rated comment is about my mother's dildo. I'm sure she would be so proud. I was little and we were at my grandpa's funeral. Being only 6 or 7 I hardly understood what it meant for him to be dead. Especially considering it was an open casket. In my mind everyone was walking up to him and saying goodbye and he was sleeping like when we saw him in the hospital. Little did I know. So when it was finally my turn to go up my mom asked me if I was sure I wanted to see him. I said of course. And I ran up to my grandpa and yelled out grandpa just like I did when we would go over and visit. It wasn't until he didn't reply and I felt his freezing cold clammy hands that I realized why people were crying. He was dead. Open bracket. Edit. Whoa. Thank you all for all the kind words. 3. My son was 6 when my mom passed away. He's 11 now, and we had a similar incident. She died very suddenly and he had absolutely no way to comprehend it. One day she was alive and playing with him and he went to sleep. Woke up the next morning. And she was gone. I will never forget watching him with his little backpack on, that had toys to distract him for the 4-hour viewing, as we were about to leave for the night and start nudging her, telling her it was time to wake up because we had to leave now. And when she didn't, cry and beg for her to please wake up and asking why she was so hard and cold. Ugh. It still rips my heart out thinking about it. When I was about 6 or 7, we went to Palm Springs on some vacation. This was 98/99. When Pokemon was huge. Mom wanted to do some American shopping and took me to a mall. One of the stores we went to was a bookstore. Well, I was in luck. In this store they were selling the Pokemon handbook that included Mew and Tajipi, which the original handbook didn't have. I showed it to my mom and begged her to buy it. However, considering I already had the original book, she said no. I was sad, but continued to look through it. Then we left the store and began doing window shopping on our way back to the rental car. The parking lot was all the way on the other side of the mall. When we finally got there, I tried to open the car door but noticed I couldn't. There was a book in my hand. I turned to my mom and showed her my accidental thievery. She looked at the book, then looked across the parking lot at the mall. Mom decided it was too far to walk. I got my stupid Pokemon book and became the first successful thief in my family. My uncle and his new wife came over to visit late one night when I was about 6. I was supposed to be in bed so the adults could enjoy visiting, but I was determined to stay up and see what was going on. So I asked my mom in front of everybody if I could have a snack before bed. Even though I'd never had bedtime snacks. My mom was strict about eating right. So of course she said no and told me to go back to bed. I decided to make a scene and lay on the floor begging for food, saying I hadn't eaten in ages, that I was starving, and asked for just one raisin. My new aunt watched, horrified, as my mom stayed firm and dragged me back to bed as I fake cried and begged her not to beat me. I was a very skinny child due to illness, so my aunt probably thought I really was being abused. But the truth is that I had good parents. I was just a little shitty sometimes. My mom was ironing clothes. She left the iron unattended for like 2 seconds. Then 3-year-old me thought, hey, this should fix the wrinkly skin on my fingers, and ironed my own hand. 3rd-degree burns. Still have the scars. When I was 6. I was super excited about my new scissors. Went around the house cutting shit. Then I started cutting electric cables. Until one was from a lamp that was on. Not fun. And melted my new scissors. I was 5. My older cousin had a very chunky, full-bodied friend. Not fat. She looked big and muscular. And had short hair. So when they introduced me to her, I asked, why is this man wearing a dress and has a girl's name? It was her birthday and all of her family and friends heard. Now. Edit. No guys. My name is not Kevin. And I did go to university. Now I am a very successful engineer. I was just an extremely hyperactive kid with a very curious mind and high sense of experimentation. Every Christmas I'm haunted by one year when I was 8 that I begged to spend Christmas Eve at my maternal grandparents' house. My aunt and uncle are 1 year older and 2 years younger than me, respectively. So their house was fun. My dad paid for me to fly from Florida to Missouri to spend the holiday with him. Just for me to want to be with my grandparents. As a mom now I know that probably gutted him. He passed away 10 years ago. So I can't even make it up to him now. There were stray cats hanging around our house that had kittens. Me and my brother desperately wanted to keep one, but of course my parents said no. So we grabbed one and hid it in the barbecue which had a lid on it. It suffocated. And we got in big trouble. That was over 35 years ago and I still feel awful about it. I decided I wanted to burn trash in the middle of the Texas summer, so my dumb little ass did just that. I just threw some cardboard boxes and tea into this barrel on my property we always had. Figuring it would be contained, you know. I poured some lighter fluid in there from my dad's grill. Lit a match and boom. Up it went, and my weird child obsession with fire was quenched until the damn fire jumped out of the barrel and started racing towards the pine woods. It was around Huffman TX. Lots of pine trees. There was apparently a raccoon in there. I doused with lighter fluid and set on fire under the trash I was trying to burn. Well, I ended up burning up a good portion of trees behind my house before the firefighters came. Thankfully it wasn't that bad and our house didn't burn down, but it was the scariest moment of my life. I don't think I ever burned anything again. My heart was broken. I cried for days. I felt so damn bad for that raccoon. I told my mom I betrayed Steve Irwin because I hurt an animal really bad. I'm pretty sure I started writing a letter to apologize, but I was afraid he wouldn't forgive me, so pussed out. Made fun of someone with cerebral palsy using canes to walk. I thought they were just walking funny on purpose and didn't know that they were handicapped. I still cringe thinking about when the teacher told me to stop and explained why that was wrong. Good on your teacher for explaining what you did wrong. Lots of adults just leave it at don't say do that. She was a great teacher. A really kind person. I felt so bad afterwards. I just hope the person didn't see me. It was during a field trip and they were kind of far away, so I don't know if they did or didn't. I dry humped the sofa while my parents watched in silent horror. I thought I was the first person to discover that rubbing my penis on things felt good. Many pieces of furniture fell victim to my testing. I discovered that the sofa was the best and I had to show my parents. I couldn't keep this to myself. I told them to come to the living room. I had something amazing to show them. I didn't just sexual assault their couch. I was teaching a class on it, offering to let my dad have a go. They just stood there. It haunts me to this day. I have never asked them about it. They must have thought they were raising a sexual predator. This question comes at just the right time of year. In kindergarten, I was the arsehole kid who blew the whistle on Santa Claus. I thought I was doing everyone a service. But several children cried and my mom had to talk to my teacher at pickup time. I basically talked back when asked to apologize. My mom was so embarrassed. The icing on the cake was when my mom told me in front of my teacher that I would in fact apologize to the class. I said, Dad says I shouldn't say sorry unless I really mean it, and I don't think I should say sorry for telling the truth. Double quote. I don't even remember this, but my mom tells this story all the time. I never apologized. Same teacher put me in timeout. I said the pledge in a funny voice. I don't think we were on good terms.